A girl in a wedding dress looks out the window at the city at night and tries to understand how it all happened. A voice comes from behind the bride, offering to help her take off her dress. The man standing on the threshold smiles and says that it will be difficult for her to take off such a dress alone. The girl desperately grabs the fasteners and assures that she can handle it just fine on her own. The groom carefully unbuttons the dress and says that you can't cope with everything alone, and this is not where you should start your family life. The man leans towards the bride and whispers that the moment the bride takes off her dress is much more important than when she puts it on. The bride thinks that her first meeting with this man was absolutely meaningless, just like their marriage. The only difference is that the end of this marriage was already a foregone conclusion. A wedding is just a day, but marriage is a whole life. But before moving into family life, couples arrange for themselves the happiest day of their lives. Amanda Smith is a wedding planner, and making the day the most special for the couple is her job. Although the weddings of the rich look luxurious and majestic, in reality, everything is far from being so. At the very beginning of the ceremony, an angry girl bursts into the hall and starts screaming loudly. The girl flies up to Amanda and, shouting that all the troubles are because of her, hits the girl in the face with all her might. The rebel screams that Amanda dared to prepare the wedding of her beloved with another, and running away, pushes the organizer. The girl, not expecting anything like this, crashes her back into the table, from which a wedding cake falls on her. The hooligan, grabbing a bottle of champagne from the table, swings at the girl and shouts that he will kill her now. Amanda screams in horror that this is a limited collection of Dom Perignon champagne, which costs $2,000 a bottle. Finally, security bursts into the hall and, in front of the amazed public, twists the enraged girl, who, in surprise, lets go of the bottle. Amanda desperately jumps forward, rolls on her stomach, and somehow manages to catch the bottle at the last moment. The security guards drag the rebel girl away, who screams that the groom was actually going to marry her. The organizer approaches the microphone, apologizes for the disturbance, asks all distinguished guests to remain in their places. The wedding will continue in a few minutes. Manager Kant hands Amanda a towel and remarks that she really is a master of her craft. At the entrance, a handsome young man silently watches everything that happens and tells his secretary that he likes everything. In the break room, Amanda struggles to straighten her back and tells Rena, her assistant, that they did a great job today. Mr. Kant comes into the room and asks the girls if everything is okay. The manager says that it was his service that should have stopped the hooligan and invites Amanda to go up to one of the rooms and clean herself up. The girl happily stands in the shower and thinks that it wouldn't be a bad idea to take a self-defense course. While wiping her head, Amanda hears a knock on the door and assumes it's a change of clothes. The girl opens the door and sees an incredibly handsome man on the threshold, asking in amazement who he is. The man hands Miss Smith a business card and tells her to get dressed and come to room 206, where he will be waiting for her. The man leaves abruptly. Amanda looks after him in complete bewilderment. Sometime later, the girl walks along the floor and looks around in confusion, looking for the number she needs. People from the hotel management company are usually housed on this floor, and Amanda wonders why she would be needed here. The organizer is worried that the hotel management wants to demand compensation from her for ruining the hotel's reputation. Suddenly, the girl explodes and thinks that she should demand compensation for everything that happened at the wedding. Approaching the right door, Amanda tries to pull herself together and calm down. A recent handsome man sits on the sofa and calmly says that his name is Dan Walsh. Amanda introduces herself in response and says that she represents the company Eternal Love, which organizes weddings. The man looks at his interlocutor and suddenly asks why she is wearing a hotel uniform. Miss Smith sheepishly says that there was an incident at a recent wedding, and she didn't have a change of clothes, so Mr. Kant kindly lent her a uniform. Mr. Walsh asks with a grin whether what happened at the wedding can be called a small incident. The girl embarrassedly says that sometimes various unforeseen events happen at celebrations, which is what happened today. Amanda says that the company only deals with the official part, so she is not aware of the internal details. Miss Smith passionately claims that their company strictly fulfills everything that is stipulated in the contract, so Mr. Walsh can safely entrust his holiday to them. Dan looks at the girl in surprise and asks why she decided that he was a future client. Amanda, confused, replies that usually the people who seek contact with her are her future clients. Dan leans back on the couch and suddenly invites the girl to work together. Miss Smith stands up abruptly, bows, and says that she wholeheartedly congratulates the man on his wedding. Mr. Walsh noticeably frowns and looks at his interlocutor with incomprehension. Dan throws his head up and states that Amanda misunderstood him. He's only offering her a job at the hotel. The man says that their hotel hosts more than 100 events every year, more than half of which are weddings. Dan continues that they plan to develop this area and are looking for a specialist who would meet their requirements. Amanda sheepishly says that she is flattered by the offer, but she has her own wedding planning company. Mr. Walsh says that he is ready to discuss the terms if it is not that the girl fundamentally does not want to work with him. Miss Smith is incredibly embarrassed, but still asks who exactly Mr. Walsh is. The man even opens his mouth in surprise, wondering if the girl really didn't recognize him. Amanda says that, judging by the business card, Dan is the head of some corporation, but she didn't understand which one. Dan's secretary, Tom Jones, happily says that his boss is the new head of the Hill Hotel Group Corporation, who has recently returned from abroad. Tom says Mr. Walsh received many excellent recommendations from leading hotel executives and returned to his home country to lead the corporation. The secretary begins to praise Dan's personal qualities, but the man waves his hand and declares that what has been said is enough. Amanda is surprised to realize that in front of her is none other than the president of the Hill Hotel. Dan says that now the girl should understand the benefits of working with him and asks what she thinks about his proposal. The girl thinks for a minute and then decisively says that she is forced to refuse Mr. Walsh. Miss Smith gets up from the sofa and says that if they have decided everything, then it is time for her to go. Dan says in bewilderment that the girl didn't even ask about the conditions he was offering her. Amanda thanks her for the offer, but assures her that she has a lot to do and she really has to go. Mr. Walsh gets up from the sofa and arrogantly declares that Miss Smith will regret her refusal. The girl frowns and states that Dan doesn't have to worry about this. Watching Amanda leave, Mr. Walsh suggests they think it over again and call him if they change their mind. The girls are driving in the car, and Amanda reminds them that a shoot is scheduled for 5 o'clock, but first they need to stop by and return the tiara. The girl estimates her expenses and income and realizes that she can barely break even. Amanda grinningly remembers Mr. Walsh's words that she would regret her refusal. Rena rummages through the bags. Suddenly her eyes widen, and she calls out to the boss in horror. Frightened by Rena's scream, Miss Smith sharply asks what's wrong, and the assistant says that they have problems. Amanda tries to wrap her head around Rena's words that it looks like they've lost the tiara. The girl begins to sweat and says that she personally packed the tiara into the case. Rena starts gnawing on her fingers and admits that after everything that happened, she doesn't remember what was packed and where. Amanda turns sharply, crossing 2 solid lines, and shouts that she urgently needs to return to the hotel. The car doesn't have time to slow down in front of the hotel entrance before Rena jumps out and runs inside. Miss Smith presses her hand to her forehead in despair and thinks that if it weren't for the damn cake, she wouldn't have to change clothes, and she would personally see to everything. An hour later, after searching the entire lounge, the girls are forced to admit that the tiara is missing. Amanda has no face and asks Rena to go and buy her a bottle of water. The phone rings. Answering the call, the girl hopefully asks if Mr. Kant has checked the CCTV cameras. The manager says that at the request of the bride and groom, the cameras were turned off, and the police see no evidence that the Burr tiara was stolen. With a feeling of hopelessness, Amanda realizes that finding the tiara is now impossible. Miss Smith thanks the manager for her help and sits down on the sofa in complete despair. Returning Rena hopefully says that they should have insurance for such a case. Amanda quietly replies that insurance will not cover the cost of the precious tiara. The diamond tiara costs $700,000, and the maximum insurance amount will be $200,000. The girl presses her hands to her face and thinks in horror that she simply has nowhere to take $500,000. Suddenly, Amanda remembers the words of Dan, who said that he would agree to any amount that the girl asked for. The girl recalls that Mr. Walsh suggested that she think it over and call him back. Miss Smith stands up decisively and tells Rena to go to the studio alone for filming, and she must resolve the issue with the tiara. At the same time, in his room, Dan asks the secretary in amazement how Amanda could not recognize him. Tom reassures the boss that he was abroad for a long time, so the girl could well not know about him. The man looks thoughtfully out the window and tells Tom that he must recruit Amanda to his team at any cost. Miss Smith sits in front of Dan, who asks why her decision changed so quickly. The girl admits that she made a terrible mistake by turning down Mr. Walsh, but now she can think straight and happily accept him. Suddenly, Amanda makes up her mind and asks if Mr. Walsh can lend her $500,000. Dan is thoughtfully silent, and Miss Smith frantically thinks about how such insolence will turn out for her. Suddenly, the president says that they have agreed. The girl does not understand how one can so easily agree to such a strange request. Mr. Walsh orders Tom to go out for a while and leave him and Miss Smith alone. Dan stares at Amanda and says he's willing to lend her money, but he has one condition. The girl looks at the man in anticipation, of course. Everything could not be so simple. Amanda sits in the hotel bar and downs shots one after another. Someone puts his hand on the girl and notices that she should drink a little more slowly. Photographer Alan notices that only Rena came to the shoot and asks how long Amanda has been in this bar. The young man says that the shooting went without any problems. The bride was happy, and Amanda had nothing to worry about. Alan is already aware of the girl's problems. Rena told him everything, and he wonders if Amanda has everything under control. But the girl silently continues to drink. Miss Smith chews her snack and turns to Rena and says that she is no longer her boss. Much to the surprise of the young people, Amanda reports that she has decided to work as a wedding planner at the I Kill Hotel. Significantly intoxicated, the girl says with a smile that she was able to find a new job in just an hour. Rena begins to cry, but her former boss calms her down and notices that everything that happened was just her mistake, which she is going to correct. Alan suspiciously asks if Amanda will really only work as an exclusive wedding planner. Miss Smith shudders, and the photographer remarks that the amount of debt is too large. Were there any other conditions in her contract? Amanda remembers that Dan's only condition was that she had to sleep with him. Having heard about the condition, Amanda decided that she had heard everything. This simply could not happen. The girl thinks that the president is simply stupid. He cannot seriously demand this even for $500,000. Amanda clutches her head and desperately thinks that she had no choice but to agree. Suddenly, Dan appears in front of the company and grins and notices that Miss Smith has decided to throw a farewell party. Looking at the girl, Mr. Walsh says with a grin that she, as a hotel employee, is entitled to a discount at the hotel bar. Alan touches Amanda on the shoulder and asks in surprise if she knows this man. Dan extends his hand to the guy and introduces himself. Alan has no choice but to do the same. Suddenly, Amanda stands between the men and declares that she urgently needs to speak with the president in private. Alan quietly asks the girl if she will be okay because she is pretty drunk. Amanda asks the young man to take care of Rena, and she herself has a couple of unresolved issues. Sitting in the president's suite, the girl sighs loudly, but does not dare to start a conversation. Dan looks at Amanda thoughtfully and does not understand what the conversation should be about that is worth such loud sighs. Tired of waiting, Mr. Walsh tactfully notices that Amanda is somewhat out of shape and suggests rescheduling the conversation until tomorrow. Finally, the girl makes up her mind and says that the amount she borrowed from the president will go towards the missing tiara. The man calmly examines his interlocutor and notices that the whole situation looks very strange. Suddenly, Amanda tilts her head down and admits that she has never slept with anyone before. Dan looks at the girl in amazement, not knowing how to react to her words. Amanda blushes and embarrassedly asks what she should do and what she should do. Mr. Walsh continues to look at the girl silently, not knowing what he can say in this situation. Suddenly, Amanda whispers that she should find out about Dan's preferences before they have sex. The man waves his hands in horror and admits that it was just a test to find out how serious the girl was. Amanda forcefully grabs the man's hands, realizing that she is in a completely stupid situation. Dan yanks his hands away and yells that if she needs to pay for the tiara, she could use the company's credit program. A completely drunk Miss Smith again grabs Walsh by the hand and asks if Dan will really give her money and not demand that she sleep with him. The man nods affirmatively, and he wonders whether the girl is really that drunk or just pretending. Amanda bows respectfully to Walsh and says she will never forget his kindness. Suddenly, the girl collapses on the sofa and instantly falls asleep. Dan tries to lift Amanda, but she just waves her hand at him and asks him to finally let her sleep. Miss Smith wrapped her head in a blanket like a cocoon and carefreely snored in it. The phone rings sharply. The girl pulls her hand out from under the blanket and tries to grope for it. Turning over on her other side, Miss answers the call and sleepily greets her interlocutor. Meanwhile, Dan gets out of the shower, wipes his wet hair, and hears a voice coming from the room. Suddenly, the girl jumps up sharply, asks her interlocutor for forgiveness, and says that she is already running. Having quickly dressed and grabbed her things, Amanda looks around as she runs and does not understand what she's still doing in the hotel. Hearing the sound of the door slamming, Dan angrily wonders who Amanda was talking to so nicely. The man is simply seething with rage. How dare this girl just run away from him without saying a word? Amanda runs past the bar where Tom is taking a call from his boss. The president orders his secretary to bring Miss Smith to him immediately. Tom runs out of the hotel door, thinking that something must have happened between these two, because they did not leave the room all evening. Finally, the secretary notices Miss Smith near the fountain, who runs up to some young man. Going up to Mr. Walsh's room, Tom sees that the boss is in a very bad mood. The secretary reports that he saw Miss Smith next to the fountain, literally a few meters from the entrance. Then the president is amazed to learn that the girl was not alone, but with a man. Dan slams his fist on the table in anger and asks if the man could be a hotel employee. Tom says that the guy was dressed in casual clothes, and besides, he looked no more than 20 years old, so it's unlikely that he works at the hotel. The secretary also adds that despite the large number of people around, Miss Smith and the young man hugged. Walsh rubs his chin thoughtfully and orders Tom to get information about this young man. Confused, Mr. Jones says that if the boss plans to work with Miss Smith, he should treat her like an ordinary employee. Dan makes tea and asks that Tom seems to know a lot about the drink. The president invites the man to imagine the situation as if the secretary was walking along the mountain and, by pure chance, found very good tea leaves. Tom washes the leaves that he carefully collected, treats and cares for each leaf with care. The secretary is looking forward to the day when he can make a cup of tea for the first time. However, out of nowhere a man appears and takes all the tea from Tom, which is what a man should do in such a case. The assistant is so lost in fantasy that he bangs his hand on the table and declares that he will immediately run after the thief and make him pay for the theft. The boss looks into the cup sheepishly and says that Dan Walsh's high-quality tea was first brewed last night. Miss Smith turned out to be the same thief who drank this tea and ran away without saying a word. Tom is shocked by the information received. It turns out that Miss Amanda stole it from the boss the first time. Dan says with a grin that he likes the idea of tea-based revenge and plans to leave it for a while to let it steep. Lying in her room, Amanda thinks that she is completely crazy since she managed to pass out in her boss's room. Suddenly, the image of Mr. Walsh lying on the bed appears in the girl's head. The girl clutches her head in despair and cannot understand where such fantasies came from in her brain. The phone rings, and Miss Smith, seeing that her friend Nora is calling, answers sluggishly. A friend asks with a smile if everything is okay with Amanda. According to rumors, the girl had too much yesterday. Nora hears with interest her friend's strange voice and says that something must have happened. Amanda wistfully says what Nora would do if she slept with her boss, but wouldn't remember anything about it. The friend asks with fear if the girl has gone crazy, since she says such nonsense early in the morning. Suddenly, Nora declares that if Amanda is not busy, then she is waiting for her at the Akel Hotel because she has a conversation. Amanda begs her friend to meet anywhere, but not in this hotel. But Nora says that she will wait for her on the summer terrace and disconnects. Terry comes into the room and fearfully asks why his sister is angry. Amanda looks at her brother kindly and assures him that everything is fine and she is not angry at all. The girl pats the young man on the head and suggests that he go cook an omelet. His brother must be hungry. Amanda places a plate in front of Terry, to which the guy begins to clap his hands with delight. putting on her glasses, Miss Smith nervously looks around, hoping that she won't be able to meet Dan here. Nora comes up and calls out to her friend, which scares her into a nervous tick. Amanda wearily takes off her glasses and asks what Nora wanted to talk to her about. The girl takes out papers and says that their media company is launching a new project. Surprised, Amanda hears that a friend suggests using Terry as a model. Nora drinks tea and says that their proposal is an excellent chance for the young man to adapt to society. Amanda notes that for a company that specializes in the concept of innocence and purity, a 20-year-old guy who sees the world through the eyes of a 6-year-old child would be suitable. Nora smiles and says that Terry can be a model simply because he is beautiful. A friend assures that this is a great chance for a young man, even if he looks at the world through the eyes of a child. But now, there are many child actors who do an excellent job. After hearing that Alan wanted to be Terry's photographer, Amanda agrees to consider it. Nora says with a smile that Terry himself said he wanted to try. The journalist says that she discussed this with her boyfriend yesterday when Amanda herself was out all night. Nora looks at her friend and notices that Amanda cannot lie because her eyes immediately give her away. Amanda tries to make the most honest look, but her eyes treacherously begin to run from side to side. Nora states that judging by the girl's strange question, it was she who spent last night with her boss. Knowing that Amanda will work at the hotel, the friend wonders who the girl meant, the manager or someone higher up. Suddenly, Amanda explodes and angrily shouts that her friend is right about everything. The girl blushes and whispers to her friend that she spent the whole night with her boss, but does not remember whether there was something between them or not. Nora asks how much Amanda drank before, and her friend sheepishly admits that she had at least 10 shots. Suddenly, the journalist asks her surprised friend if she is carrying with her the thing that she received from her as a gift. Amanda says thoughtfully that she carries a pen recorder with her every day, but has completely forgotten about it. The girl holds the pen in her hand, hesitating to turn it on, but Nora decisively says that it is better to find out everything for sure. Amanda says in despair that she doesn't remember anything at all, and that it might be better not to know anything. Nora deftly takes the pen away and says that her friend's whining is just annoying. The journalist decisively presses the button. Amanda's heart begins to beat faster. Suddenly, Dan Walsh appears behind Amanda and asks interestedly what the girl is doing here. An incredibly embarrassed girl greets a man and stupidly asks how he is doing. It is at this moment that the handle turns on, from which loud moans begin to be heard. Not at all embarrassed, the friend hands over a business card and says that her name is Nora Adams. She is a reporter and also Amanda's best friend. Dan smiles happily, introduces himself as the president of the I Hill Hotel, and declares that he has a special relationship with Miss Smith. Amanda sheepishly tells her friend that Mr. Walsh is the one who took care of her job at this hotel. Dan whispers in the girl's ear that he will be waiting for her in the same room where they met yesterday. The man politely says goodbye to the girls and says that he needs to go. Nora pokes her friend in the side with a laugh and says that this time she chose a great guy. The friend shows Amanda her hands and states that it is definitely worth it to hear Amanda moan. The girl, in horror, tries to take the pen from her friend, but she only laughs in response. Suddenly, the girls are interrupted by Mr. John and says that Mr. Walsh told him to escort Miss Smith. The man politely introduces himself to Nora and tells her to let him know if she decides to visit their hotel. Amanda sees how the young people look at each other and thinks with irritation that her friend falls in love in 3 minutes. The girl pushes Tom towards the exit and states that the president probably doesn't like being late. The secretary takes the girl to her room and asks her to wait a little. Mr. Walsh will come soon. Amanda enters the room and thinks that she has already begun to get used to it. Suddenly, the door to the bedroom opens. A young girl comes out and looks at Miss Smith in surprise. Amanda decides that she got the numbers mixed up, apologizes to the girl, and runs to the exit. Suddenly, the girl smiles and says that Miss Smith should be in front of her, who will be officiating at their wedding. Amanda turns around in horror and tries to understand what kind of wedding they are talking about. The door opens and Dan enters the room. Amanda begins to realize what kind of wedding the girl had in mind. Miss Smith sits on the sofa and thinks angrily that despite having a fiancé, Mr. Walsh is having a lot of fun at night. Dan tells Anna that she doesn't have to worry because Amanda is the best for situations like this. The girl looks at the man in bewilderment. wondering what similar cases he means. Amanda remembers yesterday's wedding. Apparently, these are the types of cases the president is talking about. Anna says that she heard about the recent incident and believes that Miss Smith is really competent in her profession. Walsh happily tells Anna that no one should see the wedding dress until the ceremony. Amanda looks at Dan in despair. How can he so calmly ask the girl he slept with to organize his wedding? The girl is painfully thinking whether to choose the path of justice or become a slave of capitalism. Amanda imagines how she will jump up and say right in front of Anna that last night this bastard was in the same bed with her. Miss Smith persuades herself to get up and tell dear Anna the truth about her fiancé. The girl gets up and starts talking about the wedding, but then the door opens once again, and Anna joyfully looks at the person entering. Arthur, a famous actor, flies into the room and, with his arms wide open, runs to Anna. Arthur apologizes for being late and explains that he was detained by reporters. Then Amanda realizes that Anna's fiancé is not Mr. Walsh at all. Dan looks at Miss Smith with a grin and asks what she wanted to say about the wedding. The whole company looks at Amanda expectantly, and she thinks that she has once again found herself in a ridiculous situation. The girl decisively says that this is her first wedding as a hotel employee, and she is all on edge because of it. Anna states that Miss Smith is very honest, which is why she wants to entrust her wedding to her. Dan notices that it's time for the couple to leave and advises them to be careful with journalists. The young people leave. Walsh calmly says that Anna is his distant relative, and the whole family is against her wedding to the actor Arthur. The president says that the celebration will be secret, so everything must be kept secret. Amanda silently nods. Dan says that he will send the girl the number of Arthur's manager. The girl also silently nods. Walsh asks if the girl wants to sleep with him. Amanda silently nods, and then looks at the man in horror. Miss Smith sheepishly says that she misunderstood something, but Dan assures her that she heard correctly. The boss says with a smug smile that the girl was very clearly jealous of him. Amanda admits that she thought Anna was his fiancée and sincerely wanted to warn her. The girl mutters absurdly that last night was her first time and that this should actually be important to her. Dan interrupts his muttering and asks, confused, if he didn't live up to the girl's expectations last night. Amanda twirls her fingers in embarrassment and says that she made a huge mistake and asks for forgiveness. Walsh crosses his arms and asks if Miss Smith knows why he chose her. Amanda is silent, and the boss says that it's all because of the girl's ability to quickly navigate difficult situations. Suddenly, Dan asks if the girl is sure that she won't fall in love with him if he decides to seduce her. Amanda hangs her head and says she's absolutely sure of that. The girl throws up her head and declares that love relationships have no place in her world. In the evening, Terry happily eats chicken and asks why Dad doesn't eat with them. The man replies that he has already had lunch at the cafe and wishes his son a pleasant appetite. Amanda, lost in her thoughts, languidly picks at her plate with her fork. The girl's recent conversation with Walsh and his self-confident appearance flashes through her head. Suddenly, Amanda loudly slams her fists on the table and shouts that whether it's the first time or not, she shouldn't be held responsible for it. The girl, in a rage, shreds the chicken and says that if it weren't for the damned money, she would never have gotten into this situation. Frightened, Terry mutters that he will definitely go to Alan for a photo shoot and earn money for his sister. Amanda calms her brother down, saying that she's just tired and they need to go with Teddy and play. The brother hugs his sister and says that he is very glad that she will not go anywhere today. 7 years ago, a day after her mother died, a doctor told Amanda that Terry's mental age was stuck at 6. My sister cannot understand how this happened because my brother was about to enter high school. The doctor explains that Teddy has a memory disorder due to shock. There is a chance that he will recover, but it is a matter of time. Every day, Terry found it more and more difficult to read and remember the names of things. Taking care of her brother fell entirely on Amanda's shoulders because her father was busy at the cafe. The girl puts her brother to bed and sits with him until he falls asleep, and the young man, as before, calls his mother in his sleep. Amanda still doesn't believe that she agreed to work at the hotel because while she was a freelancer, she had more time to take care of her brother. The phone beeps. The girl opens the received message and looks at the screen in amazement. President Walsh asks whether Amanda is asleep or not yet. The girl, in a panic, cannot decide whether to answer. Without waiting for a response to the message, Dan decided to call Miss Smith. Realizing that she won't be able to get away, Amanda answers the call and politely greets her boss. Hearing the voice of his interlocutor, the man thoughtfully asks why she is so out of breath. Unable to think of anything better, Amanda replies that she was training and asks what happened. Before she has time to receive an answer, the girl hears her brother calling her quite loudly from the room. Hearing a strange male voice, Mr. Walsh noticeably tenses up. Still not understanding who Amanda's guest is, the man looks at the phone in surprise. The girl dropped his call. Walsh collapses on the bed and wearily thinks that Amanda is striking him, but it is not clear whether this is good or bad. Standing in the shower, Dan replays in his head various episodes involving the girl, and with irritation realizes that he is jealous of her. The next morning, Mr. Kant introduces Amanda to the management team and informs her that she will now work as a wedding promoter. Amanda greets everyone cheerfully and says she's looking forward to working together. The young people joyfully greet the girl and hope that their team will become even more productive. Jack looks at Miss Smith with a grin and says that, first, we should think about how she suddenly got on the team. Kant states that the greetings are over. The president will take office in a week, so everything needs to be checked carefully. Alice shows Amanda to her workplace and happily says that they will sit next to each other. Jack pats the girl on the shoulder and says with a grin that since she's new, she should start booking. Amanda spent half the day in telephone conversations, preparing for Anna's secret wedding. Alice puts a glass on the girl's table and offers to take a short break for coffee. The junior manager says that Jack is the son-in-law of the deputy president and only got here because of his connections. The girl says that Jack is sure that Miss Smith was promoted here, and he even tried to find out who was promoting her. Amanda choked on her coffee when she learned that one of the versions of her arrival was that she had seduced the president. Miss Smith muses that she slept with Dan after she accepted the position, so technically it doesn't count. Alice warns Amanda to be careful because Jack will try to hurt her by any means. Suddenly, the internal phone rings and the word love is displayed on the display. After answering the phone, Amanda, embarrassed, says that she will immediately go up to Mr. Walsh. Alice says in amazement that this is the first time she has seen such an internal number and asks whose it is. Amanda says she's being called to the president to sign a contract. Alice decides that this is how Mr. Walsh's number is recorded on all internal telephones. Amanda goes out into the corridor and sarcastically thinks that Alice will be worse than manager Jack. The girl is standing at number 206 when suddenly her phone starts ringing. When Dan asks why he doesn't have it yet, Amanda says that she just called the room, but no one answered it for her. Walsh says with a grin that renovations at the president's office were completed yesterday, and Miss Smith was called there. Tom hands the girl a folder and says that they will discuss the amount of the annual salary later, and this contract will be the beginning of their cooperation. Mr. Walsh turns to the secretary and asks to be left alone with Miss Smith. Suddenly, Tom sheepishly says that the president should return to the contract after his hormones return to normal. Amanda looks at the secretary in amazement and concludes that she is having auditory hallucinations. Dan gets incredibly embarrassed and tells Tom that he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. Mr. Jones, embarrassed, says that the chairman called this morning and it had something to do with Mr. Walsh and Miss Smith. Dan sighs heavily, and the secretary says that the chairman intends to visit the president. Suddenly it dawns on Amanda that Tom was just talking about her too. At this moment, the hotel employees bow in respect and greet the chairman. Amanda hastily signs the contract, says that she is not feeling well and will probably go. The girl approaches the door and suddenly notices some shadows behind it and hears voices. Miss panics and thinks that she needs to hide. If the chairman sees her here, then she will be in trouble. Suddenly, Dan grabs the girl's hand and abruptly hides it behind his wide back and tells her not to twitch. The chairman saunters into the office and stops opposite Walsh. Donald Walsh looks at Dan and says he must be a very busy man. Amanda trembles behind Dan, and he calmly says that many issues require his attention. The chairman looks down and notices that for some reason there are 2 pairs of legs in front of him. Suddenly, Donald asks if his grandson is ignoring him just because he is already retired, and if that is not the case, then he would like to say hello to whoever is hiding behind him. Amanda runs forward, bows deeply, and introduces herself, saying she's from the events team. What the girl learned while organizing weddings for the rich is that they consider themselves superior to others, and communication with mere mortals is beneath them. Amanda listens to silence, but in reality she would like the chairman to yell at her, demanding to leave his grandson alone. Suddenly Donald smiles and asks if the girl is dating his grandson. Amanda waves her hand and says that this is some kind of misunderstanding. She came here solely for work matters. The girl looks at Dan, who for some reason has blushed and is stubbornly silent. The elder Mr. Walsh smiles and says that they should all have dinner together. Dan asks when it would be convenient for Amanda to go to dinner, but the girl reports that it is difficult for her to find free time in the evenings. The girl reports that the problems are related to her personal affairs, and she would not like to talk about this. Walsh smiles and states that according to Clause 1 of the contract, Miss Smith is obliged to inform Mr. Walsh of all necessary actions. Amanda flips through the contract in a panic and thinks that she should have read it carefully before signing. Dan smugly says that it's all a matter of trust. He borrows her a large sum and doesn't want the girl to run away. Amanda is confused and asks what will happen if she wants to break the contract. Walsh replies that then there will be no money, but if all the conditions of the contract are met, then the cost of the tiara will be paid in full. The man notices that, be that as it may, Miss Smith was the first to touch him. After a moment of silence, Dan says that Amanda touched his body, his pride, his desire to win, and ultimately, his heart. That night, Amanda struggled to open her eyes, not knowing where she was or what was happening. Dan waves his hand in front of the girl's face and asks if she's okay. Amanda declares that Mr. Walsh is simply handsome and kisses him. Watching the girl's expression, Walsh realizes that Amanda's memory is beginning to become clearer. Dan changes the subject and asks if Amanda is doing well at work. The girl replies that the team is very nice. The president reports that if the girl is bothered by something, she will have to immediately inform him about it. Looking at the girl's puzzled face, Dan says that they are just getting started, so awkward moments are quite acceptable. Walsh reports that the chairman is very persistent, so the girl will not be able to get out of dinner. In the evening, Amanda leaves the building and thinks that this long day is finally over. The girl remembers the stupid contract and realizes that all her troubles are because of the damn tiara. Suddenly, a car stops in front of Miss Smith and honks at her. Dan comes out from the driver's seat, extends his hand to Amanda, and invites her to get into the car, saying that it is much warmer inside. No matter how you look, but according to statistics, when making an important decision, chance plays a much larger role than rational decisions. This is why it is so important to exchange emotions during negotiations, because thanks to them, you can create the right atmosphere. Amanda wonders what Dan can get if he wins. Does he really expect to get her heart? The car enters the gate and slows down in front of a luxurious mansion illuminated by lights. The chairman joyfully greets the guests and hopes that they arrived without problems. Amanda greets the man and says the trip went well. Donald smiles, points towards the dining room, and invites the young people to the table. The waiter pours wine, and the chairman asks Amanda if it is true that the girl recently works on their team. Suddenly, the man apologizes for asking questions, offers to have dinner first, and then continue the conversation. Suddenly, Tom enters the room, apologizes for the intrusion, and says that there are urgent issues with the acquisition of a new hotel. Dan leaves. The chairman asks Amanda if he can speak frankly with her. The girl nods in the affirmative. Donald says that Dan has been used to fighting for what he likes since childhood. Once, as a schoolboy, the young man tried one dish at a party and simply fell in love with it. After that, Dan ate this dish 3 times a day for 10 whole months, as if he was obsessed with it. Donald remarks that if his grandson likes something, he will stop at nothing. Amanda listens to the man in confusion and realizes that, as she expected, it was not a momentary impulse. The chairman says that a passion for food could not harm the guy, but people are a completely different matter. The girl flinches when Donald asks if it's true that the girl's brother has mental health problems. Clasping her hands, Amanda says that Terry has no problems now. He is living his life and going about his daily business. The chairman reports that he has everything a person could want and can help Amanda and her family. The man asks Amanda how she would like to make a deal with him. The girl warily asks the chairman how exactly he is going to help her. Donald notices that, as he was told, the girl has business acumen. The man says that he can give Amanda so much money that she and her brother will have enough for the rest of their lives. Miss Smith asks why the chairman is suggesting all this to her. Donald says that now all eyes are on Dan, the hotel merger. This is a trial period for him as president, and he hasn't had a single weakness before. The girl looks directly at Donald and asks if he wants to say that she was the one who became a weakness for Dan. The chairman says that no matter how sad it is for him to admit, this is exactly how it is. Amanda is surprised to hear that if she doesn't agree to the deal, Donald will give her a hard life. The girl sadly thinks that the man says such terrible things just so that she will leave his grandson. In fact, there is no relationship between the girl and Dan. Amanda, in principle, does not understand how she could contact him. Donald smiles happily, realizing that the girl agrees and says that she needs to take care of his grandson. The girl looks at the man in bewilderment, and he explains that his grandson fell in love for the first time. The chairman says that Dan has a lot of shortcomings, and sometimes he is terribly stupid, but Amanda should try to establish a good relationship with him. Donald notes that his grandson will be furious if he finds out about this conversation and asks the girl to keep everything a secret. Amanda understands that, to put it simply, until the hotel merger is completed, she cannot enter into a relationship with Dan. With the help of the chairman, Amanda and Dan's contract will be canceled, but there is one problem. The $500,000 that the president gives is the price of the lost tiara, and the $500,000 that the chairman gives is the price of human feelings. Amanda firmly asks Donald to give her time to think. Suddenly, a young man enters the room and asks those present for forgiveness for being late. An interesting young man appears in front of Amanda, who introduces himself as Sean and says that he is very glad to meet you. The man says that he has been waiting to meet the girl for a long time, but Amanda looks at him with complete bewilderment. At the same moment, Dan returns to the dining room, clearly unhappy with the new addition to the company. There is clearly animosity between the two guys, which is still unclear to Amanda. Dan approaches Amanda and says that urgent matters have arisen, and they will have to leave the dinner. The young people hastily say goodbye to everyone and leave the mansion. On the way to the house, Amanda looks at Dan and asks what happened at dinner, to which the man says he doesn't have to answer. The girl notes in frustration that Dan used to be nice and polite. Did his feelings really cool down so quickly? Amanda points out that they could have easily skipped dinner, so why didn't they? The girl hears with anger that in fact Walsh hoped that thanks to the dinner, he could at least temporarily get rid of his grandfather's close attention. Amanda is offendedly silent. After a while, Dan says that obviously the girl misunderstood him. The president says that the girl has already worked with similar people and knows how to treat them, and thanks her for the fact that there were no problems at the dinner. Amanda reflects that she was foolish to expect that caring for other people could fill the void in her heart. The girl sits on the bed, not letting go of the phone, and replays in her head everything that happened between her and Dan. Amanda goes to bed and thinks sadly that 2 weeks have passed since dinner, and she has not received a single message from her boss. The girl once again rereads the previous message from Walsh. The phone slips out of her hands and falls on her face. Amanda grabs her phone and stares in horror at the message she accidentally sent. Suddenly, the phone starts ringing and Dan's number is identified. Amanda answers the phone in embarrassment. Walsh's voice, without further ado, tells her to come out. The man says he wants to meet her and will drive up to her house in 15 minutes. The girl understands that if she refuses the meeting now, she will completely ruin everything. Looking at herself in the mirror and seeing her dirty head and old clothes, Amanda thinks that 15 minutes is clearly not enough for her. Meanwhile, Dan is driving in the car, looking out the window and happily thinking that Miss Smith finally wanted to meet him. Walsh tells Tom to transfer all calls to his personal phone because he is going to an important meeting. The secretary wonders what could be more important than the upcoming conference with one of the hotel's branches. The car pulls up to Miss Smith's house, and Dan calls her and tells her it's time to go out. The young people drive in silence. Amanda reflects that Dan is very busy. Having pulled into the underground parking, Walsh politely opens the door to the girl and informs her that they have come to his house for dinner. The girl awkwardly gets out of the car, her leg twists, and Amanda flies forward, desperately grabbing onto the man. Walsh holds Amanda's hands and notices how cold they are, saying that she may have problems with her blood circulation. Miss Smith replies that the guy is very observant, and her hands and feet are cold even in the hot summer. Walsh leads the girl to the entrance and says that hot ramen is great for warming up. The couple enters the elevator. Amanda is pleased to notice that Dan has not released her hand. In the apartment, the girl looks around with interest. It is very spacious and incredibly chic. Noticing that Dan is about to cook, Amanda takes the initiative, declaring that she is a very good cook. After some time, the couple looks at the dish in surprise. The girl embarrassedly says that she mixed everything she found in the refrigerator. Amanda says that tomorrow is the president's big day, and in order to look good, you shouldn't overeat at night. Suddenly, Miss Smith looks at Walsh and bluntly asks if the dinner was just an excuse. Dan pours flower tea, and Amanda, watching him, notes how calm the guy is. Walsh says the company has begun construction of one of the largest hotels on Wandoo Island. Amanda's eyes light up with interest, and she asks how big the banquet hall will be. Dan pours tea and says that the hall will be huge, but the building is still under construction, so we will need to go there. Miss Smith thinks that if the hall is huge, then a separate person will be needed who can organize the work there. The guy looks at the girl and thinks that when he is next to her, it is difficult for him to stay within the framework of a working relationship. Suddenly, Dan gets up and says that if Miss Smith has finished her tea, he will take her home. Standing in the hallway, Amanda finds herself very close to a man who is staring at her. Suddenly, Dan gently takes the girl by the chin and brings his face closer to her. A moment later, the young people kiss completely, forgetting about everything and everyone. Suddenly, the light bulb goes off. Amanda clings tighter to Dan and thinks she's really sorry that she can't remember their night. Suddenly, the light comes on again. The girl comes to her senses and gently pushes the man away. Dan stands very close and quietly asks if the girl really wants to leave. Amanda understands that a little longer, and she definitely won't be able to leave, so she decisively says that she needs to go home. Suddenly, the couple hears some strange noises right outside the front door. Dan decisively opens the door and angrily asks who is there. There is a woman standing on the threshold who says that she needs Mr. Walsh's signature as the owner of the apartment. Without listening to the end, Dan holds out his hand and demands to give him the documents. After signing the papers, the couple walks to the elevator in embarrassment, not paying attention to the woman. In the elevator, Dan notices that Amanda has covered her face with her hands and is shaking all over. Walsh asks the girl for forgiveness for the fact that the lady was very unceremonious and promises that this will not happen again. Amanda laughs uncontrollably and says the president is very cute when he's embarrassed. In the car, a puzzled Dan asks if Miss Smith really thinks he's cute. The girl explains that she just noticed that when Dan is confused, he looks very funny. Amanda's phone rings. She answers the call and asks Terry why he's awake. The girl says she went out to the store for a while and will return home soon. Miss Smith looks at her boss and doesn't understand why his mood has changed so dramatically. Mr. Walsh turns to Amanda and suspiciously asks who Terry is. The girl turns the man's face towards her and says that he needs to calm down, and he has no reason to be jealous. Seeing the car approaching, Terry joyfully runs out and waves his arms. The sister looks at her brother in amazement and asks why he went out naked in such cold weather. Amanda pushes her brother towards the house, and he thoughtfully asks who this guy was next to her. The girl looks out at the gate, waves at Dan, and wishes him a good trip. Amanda looks back at the gate and thinks that later she can tell Dan about her strange relationship with her brother. The girl looks around one last time and wonders if she will ever be able to tell her boss all her secrets. A huge number of journalists gathered at the inauguration ceremony of President Dan Walsh. Dan comes up to the microphone and says that not many people liked his homecoming, and he has no idea how to rise in the eyes of these people. However, he has the power to make the Ekel Hotel chain the best in the world, and he asks his employees to support him in this field. Mr. Walsh states that only by working together can they achieve heights. Amanda applauds Dan's speech and thinks that his handsome face is now playing into his hands. Alice suddenly appears nearby and says that their president is a real handsome man, and he even has fans. Sean walks up to Dan, shakes his hand, and tells him that the president is amazing. Amanda looks at Sean suspiciously, remembering the dinner. There is clear hostility between the men. The girl turns to Alice and asks her who the man is next to President Walsh. Alice says that Sean is the vice president of the corporation. Amanda is confused and says that she did not see him on the guest list. The junior manager says that Sean came only for the press. Not a single big event is complete without him. Alice notices that at one time, Sean himself was aiming for the position of president of the corporation. But suddenly, Mr. Deng returned from abroad, and since then, all eyes have been focused only on him. Mr. Walsh talks to board members while he looks around the room for Miss Smith. Alan approaches Amanda. The girl happily greets him and asks if the shooting is over. The photographer invites the girl to come closer. He will show her pictures from the photo shoot. Alan says that Terry felt relaxed in front of the camera, and he is sure that the guy has real talent. Amanda proudly looks at her brother's pictures and says that he is simply gorgeous. Suddenly, a cold voice is heard next to the young people, asking who this magnificent one is. An irritated Dan stands in front of Amanda. Tom is visibly nervous behind him. Walsh looks at Alan and notices that he is a frequent guest at his hotel. The young man says that there was a wedding photo shoot, and he, like Amanda, is responsible for his clients to the end. Amanda turns to Alan and, ignoring her boss, invites him to go get coffee. The girl pulls the guy by the hand and says that the photos turned out great and she will pay for them. At the meeting, Mr. Kant reveals that the hotel has begun to host many more events. The manager states that they expect an increase in profits because they began to hold events on weekdays. Kant notes that thanks to Miss Smith, the number of applications for events has increased significantly. Dan hasn't said a word the entire time. The manager anxiously asks if everything is okay. Walsh looks menacingly at Amanda, but the girl pointedly turns away from him. Sitting in the office, Dan recalls Alan with irritation. He is a Walsh and is not used to losing. Manager Kant comes into the office. Dan looks at him and declares that he needs his help. The boss says that he is going to Wandoo Island this afternoon and needs Miss Smith's help. The president says that he and Amanda will be leaving, so he needs Kant's permission as the head of the department. Kant apologizes to Miss Smith that everything has changed so suddenly and says that a car will be waiting for her at the hotel. On the street, Tom is perplexed. Not only is the boss planning to drive without a secretary, but he also wants to get behind the wheel. Miss Smith comes out of the door and looks around. The president immediately calls out to her. Amanda apologizes for the delay. She was helping a guest find his way. On the way, the girl asks where they are going. Dan says that Kant should have told her. The girl looks at the navigator and in amazement realizes that they are going to Wandoo Island, which is 300 kilometers away. Realizing that arguing is useless, Amanda resigns herself and silently looks out the window. Mr. Walsh drives the car in silence, but glances sideways at his companion. He desperately wants to understand what is preventing their love. Standing on the coast, Dan stretches tiredly and says that they have finally arrived. Amanda looks at the water with delight. It has been so long since she last saw the ocean. Dan invites the girl to take a walk and explore the surroundings a little. The president says that he was interested in the idea of a small package of wedding services. The president notes that interior work has not yet begun, so now he wants to hear Miss Smith's opinion about the hall. The couple discusses that the further from the capital, the more often banquet halls are empty. But if they reorient themselves to small weddings, this will help improve the situation. The man invites the girl to think about creating some kind of romantic flair that will fit perfectly into the image of the new hotel. Amanda reflects that most couples go on their honeymoon immediately after the celebration. Suddenly, the girl asks if they will have time to get back today. Walsh's mood changes abruptly, and he asks if the girl is really that uncomfortable with him. Amanda reveals that she didn't warn her family and apologizes for making her boss misunderstand her. The man thinks about the fact that Amanda is happy to talk about work, but never talks about her life. On the threshold of the restaurant, Dan carefully hands the girl a glass of coffee. Amanda takes a sip with pleasure, thinking that Dan himself only drinks special herbal tea. The boss looks at his watch and says that he has an appointment, and Amanda must take care of a place where they can spend the night. The girl looks at her boss confusedly. After all, today he does not intend to return back. Mr. Walsh advises the girl not to worry. As soon as they finish their business, they will immediately return home. Dan wearily closes the computer and says that he needs to take a break. Amanda comes into the bedroom and says that if the boss doesn't need anything else, she will wait for him in the car. Dan looks at the girl in bewilderment and says that it's cold in the car and she can easily wait in the room. Walsh notices that Miss Smith has been ignoring him since yesterday and doesn't even look at him. The girl is embarrassed, doesn't know what to say, and mutters something absurdly in response. Suddenly, Amanda looks up and states that when she looks at a man, all she can think about is his lips. Dan presses his hand to his forehead and says that he had the same thoughts. And when the girl began to ignore him, he was afraid that he would lose his mind. The man approaches Amanda and notices that he no longer needs the girl's permission to kiss her. Dan brings his face closer to Amanda, and she thinks doomedly that there is no way back. The couple falls on the bed and begins to kiss selflessly, forgetting about everything in the world. Suddenly, Dan hears a laptop beeping in the next room, signaling the start of another conference. Amanda forcefully pushes Walsh towards the computer and tells him to stop being childish. Dan reluctantly leaves, says that he will be free in 3 hours, and invites the girl to rest. 3 hours later, an exhausted Dan stretches tiredly, realizing that he is completely exhausted. Entering the bedroom, the man sees that Amanda is curled up in a ball, sleeping sweetly. Dan thinks with emotion that even the loud sounds of sirens won't wake up the girl. The man, carefully, trying not to disturb the girl, covers her with a blanket. In the morning, Amanda turns on her side and thinks that she is very warm, but her hand rests on something hard. The girl suddenly opens her eyes, and Dan mockingly says that he is very ticklish from her touch. Amanda turns away in horror, not understanding how it happened again that she wakes up in the same bed with her boss. Dan begins to laugh cheerfully at the perplexed expression on Miss Smith's face. The girl embarrassedly asks why the president slept with her if there was another bedroom in the room. Walsh watches Amanda and asks if she usually sleeps with her brother. The girl looks at the man in bewilderment and asks how he knew this. Dan says that last night a girl came to him in a dream and, inviting Terry, lay down in his bed. Amanda sheepishly apologizes and says that she hasn't slept well the last few days, and that must be why it happened. Walsh says that everything is fine, and thanks to the girl, he was also able to sleep. Miss Smith hides shyly under the blanket. The boss looks like a handsome man in the morning, which cannot be said about her. The president laughingly says that it's enough to play hide and seek. It's time for them to get ready for the road. The girl runs away, and Dan remembers that Amanda looked like a little kitten when she slept on his shoulder. In the car, the girl looks at her boss and doesn't understand how she could please such a man. Near Amanda's house, Dan leans towards the girl, who freezes in anticipation of a kiss. But the boss just opens the car door and says goodnight to Miss Smith with a grin. Seeing the girl's embarrassment, Walsh begins to laugh and says that they will see each other tomorrow. Amanda only manages to open the door when Terry throws himself on her neck and says that he misses her very much. Sometime later, the sister notices that the guy can barely keep his eyes open and takes him to bed. Kant asks Amanda if the trip to Wandoo Island went well. The girl replies that everything is fine. The manager reports that he just received a call and was given some information. Amanda immediately gets the idea that someone might have seen her boss's car at her house. The girl is in a panic and thinks that soon rumors will spread throughout the city that the rich man is dating a simple hotel worker. Mr. Kant notices that Amanda's face has changed and asks if she is feeling well. The manager hands the girl a business card and says that at 10 o'clock they are waiting for her in room 1623. The girl takes the business card and asks what kind of secret meeting this is. Mr. Kant says that their VIP client is preparing a secret wedding and wants to entrust its organization to Miss Smith. The man notices that during the conversation, the client only said her name, so she will have to go alone. Amanda sheepishly says that holding a private meeting in a hotel room seems a little strange. The manager looks intently at the computer and says that Miss Smith has nothing to worry about because their client is a very decent person. Mr. Kant looks at his watch and says that if the girl does not go to the meeting right now, she risks being late. Amanda knocks on the door of the room, and as soon as it opens, she politely greets and introduces herself. The girl doesn't have time to finish her sentence when someone grabs her hand and drags her into the room. Amanda slams herself into what is clearly a man's chest, begins punching it and screaming that no one has the right to treat her like that. Miss Smith looks up to see Dan Walsh standing in front of her, who gently remarks that he has been waiting for her. The man pulls the girl close to him and leans in with the intention of kissing her, but Amanda pulls away in embarrassment. The boss says that he decided to personally check the number, but as soon as he got here, he realized that he really missed Miss Smith. Amanda doesn't have time to object before Dan puts his finger to her lips and looks at the door, behind which someone's steps are heard. Suddenly, Amanda pushes the man and covers his mouth with her hand, declaring that he has been allowing himself too much lately. Jumping away, the girl embarrassedly says that they should still be quieter in the hotel. Walsh notices that there is a much more effective way to silence him and kisses the girl. The boss lifts Amanda up and sits her right on the dresser by the front door. The girl completely dissolves in the gentle kisses of the man, thinking only that he does not stop. But suddenly, Amanda abruptly pulls Dan away and says that they cannot continue like this and must stop. Embarrassed, Walsh notes that he doesn't seem to need to ask permission anymore. Amanda is emphatic that the boss can't do whatever he wants during work hours. Dan takes the girl's hand in his and says that Manager Kant is aware of their relationship, so she shouldn't worry about it. Walsh says that Manager Kant has been his best friend since school, from whom he has no secrets. Amanda is upset and says that people are already whispering behind her back about how she got this job, and Dan is adding fuel to the fire. The president instantly changes his face and angrily asks who dared to spread rumors. Amanda lowers her eyes in embarrassment and thinks that she probably shouldn't slander Manager Jack and says out loud that it doesn't matter. Dan notices that these rumors insult not only Miss Smith, but also himself. The girl reflects that in any case, Jack will not be able to gain anything by spreading rumors about such an ordinary employee like her. Dan talks on the phone, and Amanda thinks that all these rumors could be a banal power struggle. Miss Smith enters the office and happily announces that she has returned, but the answer is silence. Approaching her workplace, Amanda asks Alice in a whisper what is going on. The girl shudders in fear, turns to her colleague, and embarrassedly says that she did not notice her. Amanda notices that there is some kind of oppressive atmosphere in the office and asks what happened, to which Alice suggests going outside. Sitting in the break area with coffee in her hands, Miss Smith asks her colleague in amazement who said such a stupid thing. Hearing that Jack is spreading the rumors, Amanda grabs her head and declares that there is no point in this. The girl upsetly says that she does not believe in the existence of the president's list of employees for dismissal. Alice notices that there are even more amazing rumors that only cause laughter. Horrified, Amanda hears that rumor has it that the president has a specific girl for each floor. The real reason the president is busy is that he is a terrible womanizer and has a terrible relationship with the chairman. Miss Smith can't believe her ears where so many fables came from. Alice assures that all this is true. Her cousin, who works at the reception, told her about it. Judy said that today, Secretary Tom took the keys to several rooms, supposedly for checking, and then he called a girl to each room. Out of surprise, Amanda choked on her coffee. She couldn't say that there was only one girl, and it was her. Alice asks Miss Smith to keep this conversation secret because no one should know anything. The junior manager sadly says that she had a fight with her father, and he no longer helps her, so there is no way she can lose this job. Suddenly, Amanda starts shaking her finger and states that she heard a completely different version. The girl whispers something in Alice's ear, after which she puts her hands to her mouth and declares that this simply cannot be. The girl exclaims that it cannot be a secret guest, but Amanda presses her finger to her lips. Professional experts who visit hotels under the guise of ordinary guests to evaluate the quality of service are called secret guests. They can be compared to Michelin auditors, but they evaluate not the food, but the service provided by the hotel. Amanda explains that the checks regularly carried out by the president are related to this. The hotel's reputation could be damaged by unfounded rumors about the new president, just like the Berlin Wall that came down due to a false article by an Italian journalist. It is possible that with the help of rumors, they want to undermine the president's reputation so much that this will become the basis for removing him from office. Suddenly, Alice asks how Miss Smith knows this, because the secret guest appears unexpectedly. Amanda menacingly asks if quality work isn't their main responsibility. If everything is in order, then they won't have to worry about secret guests. Alice enthusiastically declares that Miss Smith is a true professional and the best. Amanda throws away her empty coffee cup and says it's time for them to head back. Alice embarrassedly says that she needs to visit the ladies' room, so she will catch up with the boss a little later. Miss Smith notices Alice taking out her phone and grinningly hopes that she will be able to start a new rumor. Manager Jack is smoking at the entrance. Amanda walks past, pretending not to notice him. With a nasty grin, Jack asks if it is true that the president personally contributed to Miss Smith's career advancement. The girl picks up the discarded cigarette butt, throws it into the trash can, and coldly says that the garbage should be in the trash can. As Amanda opens the doors, she wonders how far Jack can go. Miss Smith answers the phone and is told that a car will be waiting for her on the second floor of the parking lot. Going down to the parking lot, Amanda's phone rings again. This time it's her boss. Watching the girl through the car window, Dan asks where she is, to which he receives the answer that the girl is already on her way home. Walsh looks out the window and says that the girl doesn't know how to lie at all. Seeing Amanda getting into a car, the boss orders the driver to find out who it belongs to. Walsh's car drives off after the girl. Tom asks the boss if he should call the hotel limousine. Dan looks at his watch, notices that it is late, and says that he will have to use public transport. In the subway car, Mr. Walsh looks out the window and wonders who could own such an expensive car. In a restaurant after dinner, the secretary carefully pours tea for his boss. Tom receives a message that Amanda has just entered the VIP room of the same restaurant where Mr. Walsh is located. The secretary tries to digest the information and wonders what Miss Smith could be doing in such a place. Dan turns to Tom and asks if there is any more information on his question. The secretary shakes his head. Amanda follows the suave waitress down the hallway, marveling at how chic the place is. At the same moment, Mr. Walsh and his secretary emerge from the private booth. Dan turns around and thinks that now he sees Amanda's voice everywhere. Entering the booth, Miss Smith politely greets her. The chairman greets her and remarks that they have not seen each other for a long time. And Amanda and Donald drink tea in silence, not daring to start a conversation. A month ago, Amanda came to the chairman, who prepared a contract for her. The girl carefully reads the document and makes sure that there is nothing in it other than what they agreed on. Donald says that, as agreed, Miss Smith is meeting with his grandson until the merger is completed. Suddenly, Mr. Walsh says that he has one condition. Not expecting anything good, Amanda is surprised to hear that the chairman asks her to inform him about her grandson's affairs once a month. Donald looks at the girl and asks what interesting things have happened in Dan's life over the past month. Amanda begins to say that a few days ago they went to Wandoo Island. The girl says that Dan specifically asked her to go together to discuss the concept of a new banquet hall. Mr. Walsh is surprised to think that his grandson doesn't usually like being surrounded by people. After a while, the conversation flows into enthusiastic, friendly communication, which brings pleasure to the interlocutors. Sitting on the bus, the girl thinks that, be that as it may, she cannot relax in the presence of the chairman. Amanda reflects that although Donald is indignant at times, it is still clear that he loves his grandson like no one else. However, when the grandfather and grandson meet, it looks like they are ready to kill each other. Suddenly, the girl happily looks out the window and notices that it is snowing. Amanda remembers that she and her mother used to go build a snowman as soon as the first snow fell. With sadness, the girl thinks that today she misses her mother more than usual. Lulled by the movement and warmth, the girl falls asleep, not hearing the phone ringing in her bag. Getting off at her stop, Amanda stretches sweetly, glad that she was able to rest a little. Suddenly, the girl hears a voice behind her, who notices that Miss Smith is late. Amanda examines the president and asks why he is so gloomy. Laughing, Miss Smith asks what kind of daredevil was found who dared to torture her boss. When Dan asks where she was, the girl states that she was meeting with her friend Nora. Walsh closes his eyes and thinks that Amanda must have a reason why she doesn't want to tell him the truth. Suddenly, the man hugs Amanda tightly and says that he trusts her completely. The girl reflects that before she didn't want to protect anyone except her family, but now something has changed significantly. Amanda rubs her cheek against Dan's and whispers in his ear that she doesn't want to go anywhere. The girl stares at Walsh and says she wants to stay by his side today. Standing at the door, Amanda invites the man to come inside. Dan kisses the girl on the forehead and tenderly says that he likes it here too. Amanda embarrassedly recalls the episode with her boss's neighbor and says that someone might hear them again. The president grabs the girl in his arms, and Amanda, embarrassed, asks him to put her on her feet. Walsh slowly undresses and says that Amanda should call home and tell her she won't be coming today. The guy gently touches the girl and whispers that she should look at him and not look away. Dan says that now he will show the girl how desperately, to the point of trembling throughout his body and sparkles in his eyes. He wants her. Mr. Kant notices Amanda in the hallway and is surprised to say that she shouldn't have come today. Miss Smith sheepishly says the doctor examined her, gave her medication, and told her to get some sleep, so she is now ready to go. The girl remembers that last night she found an SMS on her phone that Dan wrote on her behalf. The man says that one night won't be enough for him, so he gave Amanda an extra day off. The girl sighs tiredly. The boss carried out his plan and she couldn't sleep at night. Alice notices that her colleague's face has fallen, and now it is really clear that Amanda was not feeling well. Suddenly Alice says that, judging by the red spots on the girl's neck, she clearly spent last night not at home. Seeing her colleague's embarrassment, Alice says with a laugh that there is no need to lie about allergies. You won't fool her. Sitting in the dining room, Alice sheepishly says that since Amanda organizes weddings, she must have very valuable knowledge. The girl says that she has been thinking about starting a relationship with some handsome guy for a long time. Alice describes her ideal man and says that in addition to his appearance, he should also lead the company. Amanda asks, describing her ideal, but Alice had someone in particular in mind. The colleague smiles and admits that this is precisely why she got a job at this company. Alice admits that she is head over heels in love with the president of the corporation, Dan Walsh. Amanda looks at the girl in confusion and thinks that this simply cannot be. Miss Smith asks if Alice told her that the boss is a desperate womanizer. The girl says that she has been in love with Mr. Walsh since high school, where they studied together. Already at that time, Mr. Walsh was completely irresistible, and for 3 years Alice was in love with him. The girl found out that the guy was planning to go abroad to study, so she decided to write him a love letter. Arriving at Dan's class, the girl was surprised to see that his desk was covered with gifts and letters. Having not come up with anything better, Alice collected all the gifts in her jacket and decided to quietly take them out of the classroom. And of course, it was at that very moment that Alice ran into Dan at the door. The girl sighs and says that it was so long ago that Mr. Walsh won't remember anything. Suddenly, Alice declares that she is absolutely sure that the boss is still not dating anyone. Amanda smiles and wonders whether she should tell Alice that she has already picked this flower. The colleague says that she doesn't ask Amanda to set her up with the president. No matter how cool a promoter she is, she still won't succeed. Suddenly, Alice asks Amanda to tell her about her boyfriend, who he is and what he does. Miss Smith diverts the conversation, thanks the girl for her help, and asks her to keep everything that happened a secret. Alice assures that she and Amanda are now on the same side, so she can trust her completely. Mr. Kant comes into the manager's office and calls Miss Smith. The man asks if Amanda was in charge of organizing the wedding of Mr. Walsh's sister Anna and the actor Arthur. The girl confirms and says that the wedding took place last week, and now they are on their honeymoon. Kang states that there was probably a complaint about the organizer's work, because the president wants to see Miss Smith about it. Suddenly, Alice jumps up and asks the girl for permission to go with her in order to gain experience. Jack asks with a grin what could possibly happen if Miss Smith is personally summoned to the president's office. In the hallway, Alice suggests that Amanda file a complaint against Jack for sexual harassment. Tom opens the doors and reports that Amanda and Alice have arrived. Turning sharply, Mr. Walsh looks at the junior manager in bewilderment. Very rudely, Dan asks if he told Miss Smith to come alone. The boss asks if Amanda brought a junior employee with her so she could watch how she would be told off. Turning to Alice, Dan rudely asks if the girl still wants to be here. The frightened girl bows respectfully and says that she is already leaving. Left alone, Amanda says that it was her fault and asks for forgiveness. Walsh smiles and says that if the girl is truly sorry, she should kiss him. The man comes up and takes the girl by the hands. Amanda, in bewilderment, asks what's wrong with the complaint. Walsh gently straightens Amanda's hair and assures her that he has everything sorted out. Suddenly, the girl sharply pushes the president away and shouts in rage that he must come to his senses.